Welcome to Her Fantasy Football. You can hear us on Blog Talk Radio /Her Fantasy Football and on iTunes. Be sure to subscribe to us on herfantasyfootball.com so you can get our newsletter where we give you our 4 ingredients for our fun, free FanDuel game Diced. And a friendly reminder, make sure to tune into our radio show on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio from 9 to 11 Eastern on Saturday night. Also, you can chat with us on Twitter at Her Fantasy FB. I'm your host, Courtney Kirby.
And I'm Ashley Williams.
And I'm Brandon Marianne Lee.
Get them out of your lineup, guys. It's week 7. Teams on bye. Carolina Panthers and the Dallas Cowboys.
Did you guys see that meme of like Aaron Rodgers, that commercial is like, nobody comes into my house and not pay for it. And right from his commercial, and right underneath it is like Dak being like, hey man, did you pay to get into Ezekiel? And he's like, nope. Me either. Great.
Oh, that's funny. I didn't see that. Mm-hmm. That's good.
They keep saying that Tony Romo is going to come back. I feel bad. It's just getting awkward.
It is awkward. I don't know what they're going to do. They shouldn't start Tony, in my opinion.
No, they need to do a Brian Hoyer, Jay Cutler thing and just make the injury worse.
Well, our boy Jerry's saying it's a Tony Romo team. So, I mean, we'll see what happens.
It's a mistake.
What Jerry wants, Jerry gets.
It's a mistake, in my opinion. But who knows? Maybe Tony Romo will come in and he'll be amazing. It's not like we're dealing with a Brock Osweiler of 2015. Okay,
I know. People keep comparing it.
Yeah, and barely showed anything and got the W's just because of their defense. This is not what we're talking about. Dak broke Tom Brady's record for, passes without an interception at the start of their NFL career. So you can't compare the two.
It's a good sign when someone does that.
And if I was Dak, I would say that to somebody next year trying to get a deal. Well, Brock Osweiler got $18 million and you can see how bad he is. Obviously, I deserve more. Right? I mean, that's what I would say.
Well, he'll still be under contract with the Cowboys.
He's locked in for at least another 3, but I mean... It's not great. I'll be intrigued to see what they do. Ultimately, as we all know, it's Jerry Jones' call, which makes no sense. But that's how it's going to be. And I feel bad for Tony Romo, though. I mean, I do. I mean, this guy.
Oh, for sure.
He's had a great career. I wish it's the end of his career just because I'm very nervous for him health-wise. And now he's in a really kind of precarious situation because historically all of his backups have failed miserably. So everyone's just been waiting and pining for Tony Romo to come back. And that's not the case this time. So it's going to be a really interesting dilemma in Tampa. Not Tampa.
You're right. This is
Dallas.
Nothing against Tony Romo. It's sad, actually, because he's one of the good guys that we know of. And you don't want to see him go out like this, being forced out, basically.
Don't pull a Josh Brown, man.
Don't pull a Josh Brown on us. We're talking very highly of you. We did not prepared.
Don't do this.
For that.
I don't want to read any articles about you on ESPN, man.
Please.
One of the good ones.
Or anything. So anyway, so I think that it is sad. It's, but
we'll see.
We'll see what happens. Well, let's get on to some interesting situations here. We have the Chicago Bears 1-5 at the Green Bay Packers 3-2. And I know the records say that Green Bay's the better team, but I almost beg to differ. It's getting really bad out there for the Green Bay Packers. It's not pretty. And it's actually almost embarrassing. And being an Aaron Rodgers owner myself, I don't know what to do. Right, ladies? I mean, do you guys own Aaron Rodgers?
I don't.
I do.
What are you doing, Brandon, this week? Are you playing him?
Yeah. But in this particular league, my only other option is Colin Kaepernick.
Given.
So I may be in a special
yeah.
It's a deep dynasty league. It's a Sirius XM dynasty league, which is just absurd. It's...
Well, and that's funny. That's the one, Brandon, actually, I own Aaron Rodgers in.
I would start.
I own Aaron Rodgers in our Sirius XM Dynasty League. Brandon and I are both in the league, and we're just on different different leagues, I suppose. But
Different divisions or conferences. or
divisions,
whatever,
yeah. So, but I think I may bench Aaron Rodgers this week.
Do it.
For whom? Who
I
are you
don't
gonna start
even
instead?
know. I don't. Not anybody great,
It
but I
said
feel
that
like
Courtney's going to stream quarterbacks this week just to not start Aaron Rodgers. I can't
it's
touch it.
bad.
It is
It's
bad.
Well, if I had Andy
bad.
Dalton, I would start him.
It's like if the
Well,
Dalton,
no,
was
I don't
like
have
Dalton's-
anybody like good. But it's the fact of the matter. I'm willing to like risk it and not start him. I think I have Tyrod Taylor and Trevor Simeon, which I'm not going to start Trevor Simeon, but I'm tempted with Tyrod Taylor, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers is that bad. I don't know.
All
They're
right.
both
Do you
bad,
think
but
somebody's going to
we'll
pull
see.
a Tony Romo and like show up in the stands with Olivia Munn faces? Remember they did that Tony Romo and his Jessica
Yeah.
Simpson's face?
Yeah.
And it was just so,
So good.
awful. And it was like, it is not her fault that he is not playing well,
Right. I know.
but still hysterical. That I was like,
Well,
oh man.
and
That's
Eddie
awful.
Lacy now has been ruled out. So
Out,
get him
uh-huh.
out of your lineups. He's done. No Starks. So that means it's T.Y. Montgomery. And I just think that's going to hurt him too because he's relied on giving the ball off because he's the passing game has not been working. It was just another thing that I'm like, not good. So yeah, I'm really up. I'm really up and down with him. I can't decide what's going on. But ever since he came back from his bye, he's just been a mess. Most likely, you're playing him. I get it. So we'll move on. You are going to start the Green Bay defense. If you're I have him ranked number 10. Mason Crosby, love him. Chicago gives it the third most fantasy points to kickers. Jordy Nelson, he's still there. You're playing him. Randall Cobb finally found the end zone last week. And now is officially off the injury report, which is great. And he had 11 targets in each of the last 2 weeks. So things are starting to move for him, you guys. I'm starting to believe in him again. Thank goodness. As for anybody else, I'm not playing them, and that includes the tight ends, even though they should have a good game because the running back situation, but I'm just not. As for the Chicago Bears, I jumped to the Green Bay Packers first. But
You're that
the
excited.
Bears, I got depressed. So I went there first. I wanted to get the bad stuff out before I start talking about the Bears, who I can't believe I'm going to start talking positively about, but it's real, guys. It's real.
I love
Brian Hoyer. Okay, listen, he had a bad week last week. We're going to let it go, though.
But he still had over 300 passing yards.
Exactly. I that's what amazes me. And not only that, he has yet to throw an interception. Yes. I mean,
This week.
the last 4 weeks, Ashley.
I know. I'm saying this will be the week.
Yeah, that he's going to throw an interception. I bet he's still going to get over 300 passing yards.
Yeah,
Keep it going.
I think he will too.
I just think that the defense actually has struggled, and so has the offense.
Yep.
So I think Brian Hoyer's going to have plenty of opportunities. He's probably going to have nice field position in some of these cases. I think Brian Hoyer is a must start. We have him ranked number 13, but I like him more than some of the other people. I'm going Brian Hoyer. Now, Zach Miller, I think he's I think fourth is a little high for this guy. I know
It's
can't believe
it's bad
Zach
out there
Miller
for
is
tight
this.
ends,
It's
man.
bad out there for tight ends.
Bad.
But he's only had one double digit this year, and the Packers have given up the 8th most fantasy points to tight ends, so I get it. Also, he's had 18 targets in the last 2 games, which is great. But he is listed as questionable. But I think he should be fine to go to Thursday night. So you're going to play him. It is, it's tight ends, man. Alshon Jeffrey, let down this far. 13 targets. He had 93 yards and no touchdowns yet again. Really stinky for how high you drafted him. Good news is that he is not listed on the injury report for the first time in forever. You guys got away with that one. It's coming back. It's coming.
Yeah.
Also, Green Bay Packers give up the most fantasy points to wide receivers, so this should be glorious for him. But who I really like is Cameron Meredith. He is a must start over Alshon Jeffrey to me, even though I have Alshon Jeffrey ranked just a little bit higher. for those who thought week 5 was just a fluke, Meredith still managed to get 113 yards last week. But most importantly, he had 15 targets. That's huge. It's huge. If you're in PPR, that's bananas. So great. And as for my sleepers, I'm going to put Jordan Matthews there. We have him ranked number 14, but I do not love him this week. The Packers actually are very good against the run. In fact, the best when it comes to fantasy points. You have the fewest fantasy points to running backs. I like him. I'm still starting him, but I don't expect big numbers. He had 10 fantasy points last week. I think that's about what he's going to get this week. And yeah, Connor Barth, you guys, though. We have him ranked number 21, but I think he's a bit of a sleeper. I do. The Green Bay Packers go with the 5th most fantasy points to kickers, and I think you could stream him. He was completely awful the first 4 weeks. The last 2 weeks, he's been in double digits, so this could be a good thing for you. Of course, you're not playing the Giants defense. That would just be silly. Or excuse me, the Chicago Bears defense. Moving on to the Giants, we have the New York Giants 3-3 the Los Angeles Rams 3-3. Surprising. Just surprising.
Right. Although it sticks with Fisher's 50% ratio.
It's perfect.
So it all works out. Odell Beckham Jr., heck of a game. He did go out suffering a hip pointer, but he was able to come back to the game. He did receive treatment on that Monday. He's not expected to miss this week, which is great. But he had 222 yards and 2 touchdowns. It was glorious. I was playing against, while I had him on some of my teams, I was playing against him, which meant I lost those weeks against him.
I was about to say, I was just very thankful I did not play against him last week.
Oh my gosh. I had someone who... Steven, my good friend Steven, who officiated my wedding, he had Odell Beckham Jr., David Johnson, and somebody, I think it was like Lamar Miller or somebody else that went off. And I was just like,
cool.
well, I'm done. I'm done this
Cool.
week.
That was
I
fun.
even just stopped checking it at one point. I was like, yeah,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
just not even going to check the score
Oh, yeah.
anymore. It's ridiculous. But Beckham, he's, I know there's all the issues with, him getting his self under control or whatever, but you know what? Full steam ahead. You play him. He's doing well. Now, Eli Manning had also a decent game, probably in part because OBJ had a good game. He was 32 of 46 attempts for 403 yards, 3 touchdowns. He got his interceptions in because he is Eli Manning, so we got to get a few in there. So we had 2 of those. But you know what? He's got a really good matchup this week. If you're talking about streaming quarterbacks, Courtney, and I've been very anti-Eli Manning, but this is a good week because not only does he have a good matchup, because sometimes you'll see in situations where quarterbacks have good matchups, but the wide receivers aren't as great of a matchup. The receivers have also a great matchup. So this could be a really interesting stream situation. I am not telling you to rely on Eli Manning as your quarterback. But if you need someone this week, I'm okay with it. Rashad Jennings was active last week, but he only got 15 yards off 9 rushes. He did practice, so he's practicing in full, so we don't have to be concerned about an injury, but I don't love it this week. Bobby Rainey's kind of pass catching back, but he was only able to get 13 yards. I'm not loving that one either. And then, of course, you were never playing a tight end from the Giants, ever.
Never, ever. All right, the Rams. Well, here we go. Gurley. You're going to start him. That's it. Now listen, let's
drafted
get into
him.
this. You drafted him. It is what it is. He's starting a pattern here. Good game, bad game, good game, bad game. This is supposed to be a good game.
Hey.
So you're going to get about 14 points. It's a good game. Yeah, it hasn't been good. But the good thing is that the receiving core is starting to do their job, right? The quarterback is getting the ball out, spreading the field out. Hopefully this will start benefiting Gurley. That's what we're going to hope for. So I am praying for all of you Gurley owners. Thank God I'm not one of them. I'm going to go straight to the bench here because Miss Brandon, she ranked Case Keenum number 21. Guys, he is moving up. And you know who was the number 1 quarterback last week? it was Drew Brees, but Case Keenum was second.
Yep,
He
that's
was.
right.
Yes, he was. Yes.
That was crazy. And I
321 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown.
That's right.
That's right. Now he's 21.
He ran that in with
That
authority.
is
Case.
amazing. He technically on a 10-man, 2-quarterback league could still not be a starter. But
Right.
it's amazing.
Hey,
Case Keenum. He's coming up.
respect.
At some point, I think he's going to be top 15. Brandon, I think you're going to rank him in the top 15.
I think I'm
at some
averaging
point.
up 2 every week, right?
You were averaging 2 up each
Yeah,
week.
no, you did a big jump last week. I think he was 27th last week. And now you have him 21st.
I think he was 23rd last week. I may have been higher on him than
Oh.
anyone else.
Well,
We'll have to go back and investigate because
Yes,
this is something we
because-
have to track season long.
Yeah.
The case odometer is what we're going to call this.
Hey,
So-
I respect it. I think his wide receivers are legit.
One wide receiver, but sure.
It
I
depends
think
on the
Brian
day.
Quick is actually the touchdown guy.
Yeah, but Brian Quick has done nothing
He
in the last
was.
few
He
weeks.
hasn't done anything
Kenny
the last 2
Britt's
weeks.
been the guy, and then Tavon Austin likes to come in and rain on your parade
There's
here and
nothing
there.
consistent
Austin's
about
doing
this
nothing.
receiving core. There's absolutely nothing consistent about this team, really, in general. So, listen, I have Kenny Britt under sleepers. I have him ranked number 31. And the reason is not because of his performance last week. He had 136 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. That's
Nice.
fantastic. Nobody started him. Why would you have? Nobody
Yeah.
started him. And now everybody's going to pick him up and he's going to be played. And to me, he's a good flex option against the Giants that are in the middle of the pack at protecting receivers. But do not expect those numbers again, guys. It's not normal.
That's not true. You can expect those numbers again. It just may not be this week or next week or the week after that or the week after that. It will
Not
happen at least
136
one more
yards and 2
time. It will have
touchdowns.
maybe not 136, but he'll have another monster game at least one more time.
I
Yeah.
think
Just
he'll
don't-
go over
you
1,000
just-
on the season.
You just don't know when it will be. I try to
Well,
pick
that's
up.
what
I haven't
people are
checked to see if I
saying.
got him,
That's
but
what-
I'm in
sure,
a desperate
That's what
injury
people are
situation.
saying. But I think the second Gurley gets off, they're going to start. It's not going to happen. I think he's going to have a huge drop down towards the end of the season, in my personal opinion. But the whole purpose is the LA Rams are not consistent. Okay, They're
My
just not.
injuries are so bad. I'm streaming Rams receivers. I've had Brian Quick, who I dropped to pick up Kenny Britt, who I will probably drop to try to get Austin or somebody else crazy because there's nobody else out there. And I'm just looking for anyone that may have upside, possibly.
Is this in the family league?
Yes.
So embarrassing.
It is embarrassing.
Yes.
It's like I don't even want to set my lineup. I just want to like throw in the towel on that league.
So
I
good.
don't want to get the calls from mom or dad yelling at me about it either. So
Right.
Well, family
listen.
league's been tragic. It's rough stuff. Except for Courtney's done well. Except for I beat her last week. It's the circle of life.
She did beat me last week. The worst team in the league beat the best team in the league. Barely.
Not worse
And I had a
anymore.
really bad league.
Although I may
Not
still be
worst
worse,
anymore. I was to say Lance Kendricks. I haven't talked about him all season because why would I? He did get a touchdown last week. Congratulations, but don't. Okay, just don't. Don't do it. We're moving on. Everybody else obviously is on the bench. New Orleans Saints 2-3. The Kansas City Chiefs 3-2. Excuse me.
All right, so we got a big problem here. Drew Brees is on the road. So far on the road, he's scored 14.52 fantasy points at the New York Giants and 11.88 points at San Diego. At home, he's averaging 29.97 points, a little bit of a difference.
Just titty bit.
Yeah, about 15 points worth of a difference. That's fine. It is what it is. So Kansas City gives up the 8th fewest points to quarterbacks. They do give up the 15th most points to opposing running backs, but it's Ingram. Ingram only has 2 outings of double-digit fantasy points so far this season in standard scoring. I understand the frustration. I'm still going to go with him. I highly doubt, based off of the situation that is with the wide receivers in the league, that you have a better option, but it definitely makes me nervous. And yeah, you should be nervous too. Brandon Cooks did finally go off last week.
Yeah,
I
he
actually made that
did.
prediction on our SiriusXM show on Saturday.
Yeah, you did.
I was like, this is it. This is the one. I'm a little worried about it happening again. So again, if Breeze is only getting 11 to 14 points, who else is getting points? Snead is seeing fewer snaps and targets than Michael Thomas. Now, Michael Thomas, speaking of, is the only flyer that I would maybe take a chance on at the flex position. I mean, now, of course, you could play Cooks or Snead in the flex, but, Michael Thomas is actually someone who might be available in your league, actually. He has a touchdown in each of his last 3 games, including an away appearance, and that's pretty solid. And Kansas City gives up the 6th fewest fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Coby Fleener has 2 great games, and then every other game has gone for 3 or fewer fantasy points in standard scoring. So I am not starting him this week.
Okay. So Chiefs then?
Sure.
Yeah, I covered everybody, I think. I mean, you're not going to start their defense, right?
No.
The Saints.
No.
Yeah, come on now.
Well, the Chiefs certainly had a game, so that was fun to watch. But we'll start off with a little bit of news for the Chiefs here. So Kansas City Chiefs, they shipped Miles Davis off to the Packers in exchange for conditional 2018 7th-round pick. So he's been kind of on the chopping block all season, and it's just been kind of a matter of trying to find the right team for him. So naturally, with the Eddie Lacy situation, Starks, they need some running backs, so insert Nile Davis. So I'll be intrigued to see just how he fits in there. But he's
Disaster. Green Bay's
no longer a
disaster.
Chief.
It's a disaster. That's why I covered it first. It's really depressing.
It is.
Do you
Travis,
think this election system's depressing people? The Green Bay Packers is depressing.
imagine how any
That's
Wisconsin is
depressing.
feeling right now.
Oh, he
Election
needs to eat
and
cheese.
Packers.
They need to bring cheese into that locker room.
Maybe he does need cheese again.
Seriously.
Maybe. All right, well, Kelsey. So Kelsey only had 3 passes for 32 yards, which was not great. But it
That
was
weather
all
was
run. It was bad weather. It was all run. Alex Smith only had even attempted 22 passes that entire game. If we look at Kelsey, kind of like what you were saying, Courtney, we've seen a pattern, right? Right about now is when we start to see some patterns with some players. And like who was it who had the every other week? It was
Gurley.
Same with Kelsey. He had a good week, then bad week, good week, then bad kind of pattern. So we technically are in a good week and it is a good matchup. So you should be all good to go with Kelsey. Kelsey is a major part of this offense. I think with that ridiculous weather that they had Charles back. They wanted to be able to try to get him in as well as establish what was going on with Ware. It just didn't play into Kelsey that game. But I think we're going to see him come back this week, so don't panic about it. In terms of with Ware, he's still chucking along there. I mean, technically, he had the better performance. He had 131 yards and a touchdown. And then he had a couple catches for 32 yards as well on top of that. But Andy Reid has said that Charles still, even though he is playing now, he is still not ready for an every down role situation. So the question is, have we entered into a committee? Are we in a committee situation with Kansas City? Or is it indeed the fact that Charles just really isn't truly able to have the full workload yet? I'm not sure. Charles didn't have a horrible game. He was 33 yards off 9 carries and a touchdown. It was kind of just warm and fuzzy to see Charles rush back in. I thought he actually looked pretty decent. But I think Ware is
I thought he did too.
a
I thought he
major
looked
part.
really good.
Yeah, I thought he did.
He
So,
looked
but
good.
I think they were trying to protect him because of the weather again. The last thing they need is him to tear his ACL again in crappy weather.
Yeah, I thought he did really good.
yeah, I thought he did great. But I think Ware will still be used. I think that they're gonna
Fair.
still have that situation. So I don't think you need to freak out and not play Ware. You can still play him. Who you can freak out about is Jeremy Maclin. Every week I get angry about this. He has not had a touchdown since week 1, and he has had fewer than 80 receiving yards, not only all of his games this season, but he technically is on an 11-game stretch right now of being under 80 yards. So while this is a really good matchup this week, his value for me is incredibly low because he's just not somebody that they are targeting in the end zone. So, I mean, technically you can't be that mad if 8 points. But like I've said all along, like he really is just kind of in that flex role situation for you. And he's not somebody that really is being targeted in the end zone, which is really unfortunate.
It is unfortunate, Ashley. I was going to see how the Kansas City Chiefs defense did last week. Decent. Indianapolis Colts 2-4. The Tennessee Titans 3-3.
You know, Tennessee has a sneaky defense, and I think you're going to be disappointed with a lot of the Colts this week, and I apologize. Hilton was limited in practice due to a hip injury. He only caught 3 catches for 49 yards in a tough matchup against Houston last week. I think you still have to start him. Watch that injury report. Philip Dorsett has only 1 game with double-digit points in standard settings. It was his 1 game with a touchdown, 3 or fewer catches in every game since week 1. Tennessee's given up the 15th fewest fantasy points to opposing wide receiver. It makes me nervous.
And I think he's questionable.
And yeah, exactly.
It's bad. I don't even know if I ranked him this week.
Yeah, I think you can drop him in a lot of leagues.
Yeah.
You know, this is with Moncrief being out even.
Yeah.
He has a lot of opportunities, guys. It's not working out. Gore is steady, but Tennessee gives up the 8th fewest points to opposing running backs. You know, he came out last week and said this is not why he came here. Them losing last minute to Houston. He's upset. I still think he'll be fine. High floor, always with Gore, but also low ceiling. It is what it is. I would consider Jack Doyle in a desperate situation due to Dwayne Allen's injury and Jack Doyle's touchdown upside. And he scored 1 last week, and he scored 2 in week 1. So hopefully he can score 1 against Tennessee so that they can have something on the boards.
Did you chant? Because I did. Doyle rules!
No, because every time you do that, I have no idea what you're talking about. But I love it.
Are
when
you
do it.
serious?
Have you never seen Billy Madison?
I have, but I don't remember it. I don't have it memorized,
come on,
you guys.
That's the best part.
It is classic.
That's the best part.
I mean, his name is not even O'Doyle. I can't even say it now. It's Doyle, not O'Doyle. But I can't help myself.
That's so classic. Oh, I love it. All right, Ashley, the Titans, my favorite new team.
Well, you will not be disappointed by the Titans this week.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of another quarterback that you can stream, Marcus Mariota. And we said this earlier. We said that he's going to have a stretch where he's going to be someone that you can play. And it is going to fall off. And it will fall off. But it is
I'm
not.
playing him this week against Mom.
Do it. It's not falling off
Wow.
yet. He's got a great matchup. So he threw for 284 yards. He had 3 touchdowns. This was against the Browns, which we said he was going to have a great matchup based off A, just the Browns being pitiful, and B, we saw what Tom Brady did to them. Again, not that Tom Brady and Marcus Mariota are the same caliber, but we knew that it was possible to have a really good scoring fantasy game against the Browns. And indeed he did. So the Colts give up the 9th most points to quarterbacks. So this is going to be another really nice, yummy matchup for him. DeMarco Murray also had a great game. He is always a must start. He rushed 21 times, only for 65 yards, but he had a touchdown. He got you enough points for what you needed. He's got a great matchup. The Colts give up the 2nd most points to running back, so he should be able to tear it up today, or excuse me, on Sunday. And Kendall Wright had a good one. He had 8 catches for 133 yards, including what was as part of that 133, a nice big long 48-yard touchdown. But what's interesting is that he only played in 22 actual offensive snaps and only run 14 pass routes. So he didn't actually get a whole lot of volume. But what I like about it is that basically tells me that when he's on the field, the intention is for it to go to Kendall Wright. Now, the question is the defense going to figure that out? Quite possibly. They might be able to cover him. Kendall Wright is another classic guy, much like our good friend Kenny Britt, that has one good game and then he radio silence. So it's a chance that he may not. But I kind of feel like with Tajay Sharp being horrible at this point in time, Kendall Wright has stepped in, and along with Rashard Matthews, who had 70 yards off 3 targets. He's kind of that little bit more of a lawn ball threat. The matchup.
He's on my misfit team. I call him my misfit team. They're all bad players.
But they have
the Brad Evans link, but I'm winning because for some reason one of them will have a big game. And
if you play the matchup,
Rashard Matthews did his job. So
it's not a great matchup this week though, because the Colts give up the 6th fewest fantasy points to receivers. But I think Mariota is going to be so hot. And with DeMarco Murray is going to be such a strong presence, I do think that it's going to open up that pass a little bit more. I think they're starting to find a groove. So I'm comfortable with Kendall Wright or Rashad Matthews. But you are absolutely not playing Tajay Sharp, who, according to Coach Mike Mularkey, has taken a step back. So,
You think?
yeah, well, he's taken a step back, but I think, they basically, he said that he has to transfer, hard work onto the field. So there's a situation going on, obviously, and you don't want to be any part of it. Stick to the main guys that we talked about today and ignore everybody else on this team.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Oh, and Delaney Walker. I do want to touch
yeah.
base on him super quick.
I don't because I'm
Excuse
mad
me.
at him still.
Yeah, you should be. He
It's
only had 2 catches for
depressing.
21 yards on Sunday. And a lot of people are really down
He's my
on him.
one good player on my misfit team.
I know. Well, here's my take on it. A lot of people are really down on him, and I'm not necessarily down on that train per se here. Mariota has a really easy matchup this week. So I don't necessarily know if I expect Walker to bounce back, because I feel like Walker does better when Mariota doesn't have good matchups. When Mariota does have a good matchup, he goes more to his receivers than he does his tight end. I think Walker still has a place. And technically the Colts give the 11th most fantasy points to tight end. So in theory, he does have the better matchup compared to Wright and Rashard Matthews. But I just don't think this is the particular week for it. But I do think that the week afterwards will be a much better week for him. So don't panic on him. Hold tight. But this I just don't think is the week.
Right. The undefeated Minnesota Vikings 5-0 at the Philadelphia Eagles 3-2.
I think that streak comes to an end this week, guys.
Say it doesn't sound.
What? I disagree.
I disagree
That's crazy.
too. But
We've got to
whatever.
beat up Stephon Diggs, who was limited in practice Monday to only being allowed to stretch. That was what he was allowed to do, was stretch.
They won without him.
He was limited on Wednesday, so I don't love that. Philly does give up the 7th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, so that's going to be a tough matchup. If Diggs does play, I feel a little better about it, but if he doesn't, we're dealing with the Cordell Patterson mess, which to me has just historically been a mess since the dawn of time. I know he did okay before the bye, but I just won't even talk about or address it because he will forever be a mess until he proves consistently at least 4-game stretch to not be. Charles Johnson did okay, but to me, I'm a little bit nervous about that because it's a bad matchup for him. Kyle Rudolph,
Excuse
who's
me.
been someone that has been consistent for Sam Bradford,
Hiccups.
also has a bad situation because the Eagles give up the 2nd fewest points to tight ends. We've got Sam Bradford, who's got a bad matchup that Philly gives up the absolute fewest points to quarterbacks in Bradford's situation. And then we've got our running back dilemma that, McKinnon and Asiata. So one of them, they got a slightly of the better matchups that Philly gives up the 16th most fantasy points. It just makes them an average of the pack defense against the rush. But the tough part is you don't know who it's going to be. In week 4, McKinnon had the most points. In week 5, it was Asiata. And even if they tell you that said person is going to be their guy, they've also proven that that isn't necessarily even going to be true. So you don't really know who you should play here. It's a tough matchup across every single position. Yes, they're coming off a bye, which generally is a good thing. At least if you're on an Andy Reid team, it's generally a good thing. But I'm just really not confident. I'm not feeling great about this game at all. And playing anyone on it.
Boom. Well, yeah, the Eagles have have an issue here. They are going up against the Minnesota Vikings. And I'd say now we're in week 7 that I think we all can agree you don't play anybody against the Minnesota Vikings. Right?
Dude's legit.
So literally everybody's on my
Completely agree.
bench. Jordan Matthews is a sleeper, I suppose, but he's listed as questionable. Minnesota gives up the 2nd fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. So that's a really tough start. Ryan Matthews, I mean, only if you're desperate.
Did we lose Courtney?
I think we did lose her.
Courtney.
Last thing I heard was only if you're desperate.
So I just don't think it's going to be Zach Ertz. And that's what I'm saying.
We didn't hear what you were saying.
We lost you after Only if you're desperate with Ryan Matthews.
Did Google get it?
I don't think so.
I don't know. So how about you repeat
Then
it,
let me
Courtney?
just say, I'm going to repeat it. Zach Ertz is a no-go. Minnesota averages only 12 real points per game for their opponents. And that means that there's only one touchdown that's allowed, if any. It might just be all field goals. Or I'm not betting on Ertz being the one person that gets the touchdown.
No.
I'm not going to. So
What a
we're going to walk away.
disappointment.
Ertz,
Yeah.
general? Yeah.
Well,
Big letdown right now.
he's been hurt.
Sure. But don't
I
let him
mean-
off the hook.
Right.
Come on, there's way worse letdowns that have played all 7 games this year than Zach Ertz. Not like we thought he was going to be Gronkowski or anything.
Well,
I
some
thought he had
people actually kind of did.
potential. Yeah. He was like the 6th or 7th tight end off the board.
I always just
Brother
assumed-
of Jimmy Graham, let me tell you.
I always put him in the Zach Ertz category, which is you don't draft him. But others felt strongly about him this year.
I
So it has been a
still think Zach
disappointment.
Ertz is going to be good.
You
I'm
guys are
not
crazy.
I'm not down on Zach Ertz. This week he plays Minnesota. I'm down on everybody on Philadelphia other
I
than the
agree.
defense. So this is nothing against him. Last week was his first week back. Give him a minute. I think he still has potential, especially going into your playoffs, of being a tight end option for sure, especially with the tight end situations going on. All right, the Cleveland Browns 0-6, and the Cincinnati Bengals 2-4.
Yay!
Yay!
This
is a
is your
good one.
weekly PSA to pick up Corey Coleman. If you have an IR spot and you can have the place on your bench, that's cool. He may even get dropped this week after everyone plays. So just keep your eye out for it. Kessler had his first big game of the season.
Yay!
Another nice matchup against Cincinnati, giving up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. But I'm going to say to hold your horses. I think Cincinnati's going to try to beat up on the Browns, and they'll probably be successful. Crowell had less than 25 yards in both of his last 2 outings. Cincinnati does give up the 10th most points supposedly to running backs, but still, it's getting a little dicey out there. But again, running backs, dire situation. I get it. Duke Johnson finally scored a touchdown last week, his first of the season, but I'm not jumping on that bandwagon. I am not, and I'm not going to tell you to do it either. Pryor will do everything he can to play with that hamstring that he injured last weekend. He's still questionable, but they are hopeful he will play. So are you. Another great outing at Tennessee, 9 catches of 13 targets, for 75 yards and a touchdown.
2.
There you go. Yes, absolutely. Sorry.
So good. He's
2
so good.
touchdowns. What am I doing? What am I saying?
Yay.
Cincinnati gives up the 5th most points to tight ends, but Gary is hit or miss. Sorry. Now, he does have 57 or more yards in every outing since week 3, but no touchdowns so far. Again, Cody Kessler's playing.
So that's the thing.
That's the thing. So it is. Everyone's talking about Ricardo Lewis. Everyone. Literally, I've done like 15 different spots, I think, this week. No, not 15, but literally 5. It feels like 15. Everyone's asked me about Ricardo Lewis, if he is the guy to own in Cleveland. I'm
No.
going to stop you right there. Yeah. No. Dynasty? Yes, absolutely. 4 more targets every week since week 3. However, his best game was for 65 yards. And again, no touchdowns on the season. So hard to trust.
The Bengals.
I was filled with rage when Duke Johnson scored and not my Isaiah Crowell.
I know.
Just wanted to point that out.
Duke
Anyway.
is on my misfit team.
Yeah, he is.
Mm.
Anybody you did not want to score a touchdown, I own him on that league.
Pretty much. I was playing against Terrell Pryor too, so that was delightful. But on to my Bengals. So
Way to go, Terrell.
yeah, big
So you
props to
say-
you, bud. So Giovanni Bernard. So we've got our typical Cincinnati Bengals running back situation. It's my favorite every year. Bernard, he only rushed 15 times, but he got what sadly was the team high of 49 yards last week against the Patriots. But against Patriots, it was tough defense. But he's able, because again, he's a pass catching back. He got 4 receptions for 45 yards. So he was able to still get you decent points. So yay, Giovanni Bernard. If we look at this particular matchup here, Cleveland has given up the 11th most points to running backs. So that's good. And they give up the 13th most fantasy points to wide receivers. So in both categories that Giovanni Bernard technically kind of falls into, it's a really favorable matchup. So Jeremy Hill, he rushed 13 times, so just 2 times less than Bernard, and he was only able to get 38 yards. And he only had 1 catch because, again, Bernard is their pass catching back. So for me, if I had to play one versus the other, I am playing Bernard. I am not convinced that Jeremy Hill is fully healthy. If you're gonna lean one way, you're leaning Bernard until kind of proven otherwise at this point, until we are proven exactly that Hill is healthy. Now, AJ Green, he had 88 yards. Again, this is pretty standard. He is always in that 80-yard range. We just need to get him some more touchdowns. But again, you cannot fully complain of the fact that the guy could consistently get you 8 to 10 points a week. You're playing AJ Green. Now, where it gets a little tricky is in terms of those secondary wide receivers. We've got the Brandon LaFells of the world, and we've got the Tyler Boyds. So Brandon LaFell has technically been the one that's been doing the best the last few weeks. But Tyler Boyd had a heck of a game. He had 4 catches for 79 yards, whereas LaFell only had 13 yards, but he had a touchdown. So both were kind of incorporated. Again, it's a really great matchup. So if you need to stream a wide receiver, they're both in a good place. And Andy Dalton, you know, he quietly always does well, and he has quietly been a starter for you for a while here. And he has a great matchup as well. Yeah, I mean, Andy Dalton will never get the respect that he should get, but he's got a really yummy matchup. Cleveland gives up the 3rd most points to quarterbacks. So compare that with a good matchup that he's going to have with Bernard and the good matchup he's going to have with his wide receivers. This is a team that you can really, for the most part, be full steam ahead on, other than my weekly update of me telling you to not play Tyler Eifert, because that's what I do every single week thus far. He was ruled out last week. Week 7's not looking super promising. He was limited on practice on Wednesday, and apparently he needs to get through an entire full practice. This should not be an apparently, it should be an obvious, for him to be able to play in week 7. So that really doesn't leave us a whole lot of time for him to be able to get that in. And even if he does, I am not confident for you in starting Tyler Eifert. So do not be tempted. Even if he does play, I think you should hold steady on that.
Game of the week. Washington Redskins 4-2. The Detroit Lions 3-3.
You know, Washington had a rough start, but they have been quietly pretty darn decent for fantasy. Just a little bit crazy, but true. You know, look at the stats. There's some good stuff going on. So I love this matchup because Detroit has a terrible defense. So let's get into that. Kirk is someone you need to play because Detroit gives up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Deshaun Jackson didn't practice on Wednesday due to a shoulder injury. Supposedly he'll be fine. Keep an eye on it. But as I said, Jamison Crowder was actually the beneficiary of Jordan Reed being out. 3 catches for 52 yards and a touchdown. He's getting a lot of slot work, although he did have 1 pass that went for over 20 yards on the target. And it actually was the one that ended up being his touchdown. So he's kind of, you know, dimensional. I like him. Matt Jones had a big game last week, 16 carries for 135 yards and a touchdown, no receptions. Hard to trust that kind of volume. Yeah. Is that fair? Can we fairly say that? Yeah, I think so. And Jordan Reed, I didn't even rank him this week. I'm making a moral stand on this. You know, the guy has six concussion.
That's not your job.
It is my job to tell you it's his 6th concussion since 2011. I do not think he will play this week. I don't know if he's going to play the rest of the season. I don't know if he's going to come back.
He will. They all come back. They love the game.
Whatever.
Detroit Lions, Brandon.
Great matchup for the running backs. They give up the 7th most points, the Washington Redskins, that is. But unfortunately, who? Everyone's questionable. Right. Eric Ebron's questionable. Theo Riddick's questionable. They have Dwayne Washington, who's also questionable. They have Zach Zenner and Justin Forsett, who did nothing last week. Zach Zenner actually had the most out of the 2 of them, but it certainly wasn't anything to write home about. I mean, is it a good matchup if you can't take advantage of it? I don't know. I don't think so. People are figuring out Marvin Jones. Let's just be honest here. I'm a hint concerned. Last week, 2 catches for 10 yards, but he did score a touchdown and bailed all of us out. Thank goodness. The last time he went over 100 yards, it was week 3. And to be fair, it was actually over 200 yards. So that's pretty impressive. But my point is that I think the defenses are planning for him now, and it's been difficult for him to get more. But the good news is that Golden Tate did actually have his breakout game.
Yay!
10 targets, 8 catches, 165 yards, and a touchdown. However, Washington gives up the 10th fewest points to opposing wide receivers. Whoever's in the slot is actually going to avoid Josh Norman, which is a good thing. But guess who's in the slot? Anquan Bolden. Yeah.
I'm into Bolden.
I am too. I think that he's a really good sleeper, someone that you can fill in. He has spent over 80% of his routes run in the slot, and that again is the right place you want to be when you're playing against Washington. 3 touchdowns in the last 6 weeks. Can't ignore that.
Did you guys see Josh Norman's prank on Emmanuel Sanders?
No.
Oh my gosh! So they did a DraftKings. Like they were doing this like setup, and Emmanuel Sanders and Josh Norman were supposedly told that this like this group of people where they were like showing pictures of pro athletes, and they were like, you know, what do you think of this person? They'd like all give their opinions. They were told to be one of the people, and they wouldn't know that they were professional football players. But really, everybody knew about it except Emmanuel Sanders. And when they brought up Josh Norman, Josh Norman freaked out on the study group and was like, you know, calling them names and saying, you guys are jerks. You don't, blah, blah. And Emmanuel Sanders was like, dude, like, and he like gets up. He's like, dude, they're filming you, man. And he walks out. He's like, I mean, he's mentally just not right. I mean, that's not right. Josh Norman's outside, like, we got him. He's like, and you know, Josh Norman, like, he gets in character before
he's
all
an
his
actor,
games, right?
Yeah.
He's an actor. He's like, you get to see my acting chops. This is good.
Nice.
This is good. But Emmanuel Sanders is like, not cool, guys. And he's like, I think Josh Norman seems like a good guy. Like trying to fake his Sanders. Oh, it's so good. You guys should look the video up. Cute.
I will.
Sorry.
No, I love Josh Norman. I'm very excited for him. And man, Carolina, you messed up.
Yeah. Clearly, they're feeling the pain now.
Ooh, just sipping tea at home. That's all he's doing. None of my business.
Yep. Sorry, you can finish Detroit.
I am done.
You're
There's nothing
done.
else to
Oh,
say.
okay, good.
I haven't started
Excellent.
the Detroit defense. I just told
No.
you how bad they were at covering everything.
That's right. All right, we have the Oakland Raiders 4-2, the Jacksonville Jaguars 2-3.
All right, so Jacksonville gives up the 12th most points to opposing quarterbacks. Carr has 4 games of over 20 fantasy points out of 6 in standard scoring. So I think that Carr is someone that you can start. I think a lot of people aren't going to focus as much on this game as they are the others, which, by the way, also, I don't know if we said this, but there's the London game this week.
Right, the LA Rams.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. The Jags also give up the 9th most points to opposing wide receivers. Cooper caught 10 of his 13 targets last week for 129 yards versus Kansas City. And that was in horrible weather. Really bizarre game plan. But somehow, out of everyone, Amari Cooper was successful. Very weird. The week before, he caught 6 of his 12 targets for 138 yards at a touchdown. Obviously, that's only 50%.
Well, it's because I traded him away. That's why he's doing well.
Right. He's doing a great job.
Mhm.
Is that the trade you made with your husband?
With my husband.
Courtney's husband. I knew I was giving him up. I really needed a running back, so I got Tevin Coleman out of it. I got Tevin Coleman and Sterling Shepard. And Sterling Shepard, he knows I didn't bring him up because my anger is it's like max level with him. So I couldn't even address him today.
Gotta let that go.
But I just want to let you know that's why Amari Cooper is going off. I'm in the know of this.
So you're welcome, Amari Cooper owners.
You're welcome.
Yeah, you're welcome. I will say that Amari Cooper played those 2 games at home, and now he's away. Now, I don't know if that will be a difference maker or not, but I will. No, it's just that
it's just because I trade him. Yeah, feel free to send me like money requests on Venmo to pay me for your good fortunes of me trading him away.
Well, anyway, the bad news is that Crabtree had a stinker last week. Again, weird game and terrible weather. 2 catches for 10 yards. It's fine. I'm going back to Crabtree and feeling fine about it. Latavius Murray is still questionable with turf toe. DeAndre Washington and Jalen Richard are splitting carries. What a disaster. Also, it's hard to run against the Jags. They actually give up the 10th fewest points to opposing running backs. Way to go, Jags.
Yeah.
Right?
Way to go. Way to go.
Way to go. Clive Walford's still questionable. I don't know what's going on with him. I think he's hard to trust. So I'm going to say no go. Although I could change my mind by Saturday, depending on reports on his health. So make sure to stay tuned or tune in, I should say, to our SiriusXM show, 9 to 11 p.m. Saturday nights Eastern.
Boom. The Jags, Allen Robinson is in my must-start category, but I have him ranked lower than most people. And I have to say, I'm punishing him from last week. I'm punishing him for this season. He just hasn't performed the way that we all thought he was going to. And in the fact that the Jacksonville Jaguars defense isn't that good, right? So there's no reason why this offense is imploding the way that they are. But it's a great matchup. Raiders give up the 4th most fantasy points to wide receivers. He should have a bounce back week this week, but he needs more targets. It's not brain science here, guys. You know what I meant. Obviously, I don't know what I'm talking about. But 6 targets is not going to cut it. He has to get double-digit targets to be productive. So let's go. Let's move it. Blake Bortles, scary. Seriously, Bortles has been all over the board this year. I mean, I love consistency, and there is nothing consistent about any of these players on this team. Sure, it's a great matchup again for him, but I don't know if we can trust him. I think ranking him at 12th is just perfect because he's right there in the cuff. Only you know how desperate you are, right? Yeah. He's right there, whether he's a starter or not. As for sleepers, Chris Ivory and TJ Yeldon. Ivory out-touched Yeldon last week for the first time this year. And Ivory found the end zone. Only the 2nd rushing touchdown for the Jaguars since week 1 when Yeldon scored 1. So that's depressing. And neither has been that impressive thus far. So, if you need to start one, I'm starting Ivory because it seems like he's kind of on the ball to taking over the majority of the carries. Not majority, but 58%. But it's really bad. Julius Thomas, he's only in sleepers because of the matchup. If he isn't going against Oakland, I would have him on the bench. So as far as anything else positive about him, I don't have anything. It's bad. Alan Hearns saw 11 targets last week, but he's listed as questionable this week with a shoulder injury. He is a complete flyer. Marquise Lee might be the sleeper actually in deep leagues. He has seen 6 targets in the last 2 weeks, and it's Oakland. So he is a very good possibility to make a big play this week. Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins. The Bills, LeSean McCoy. And then
killer
it dies.
Game.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Best draft of 2016 thus far. And then he gets hurt. Now he's listed as questionable with a strained hamstring. Mike Gillislee is the backup. And really, if you're going to own a backup, if you're going to handcuff yourself, Gillislee is one of the best out there, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
He still plays. The second they get ahead, they pull McCoy and Gillislee goes in. He's gotten 2 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. So he's not somebody bad to own. So listen, McCoy starts, you're starting him. Obviously, he has been phenomenal. Great week last week. Great season thus far, which just makes me excited. Buffalo's defense. Miami gives it the 6th most fantasy points to defenses. So I'm surprised actually it's not more. Miami's so bad, but it is what it is. Tyrod Taylor, he's ranked number 16th. As you said, I may start him. I don't know. It's a real possibility. It is the Dolphins. Charles Clay. Clay goes up against his former team, and we love revenge games. So the fact of the matter is the Bills are riding on McCoy's coattails. There's no question about that. So it's hard for anybody else on the Bills to get started and be consistent. He's also listed as questionable. But the targets are there, so he just needs to make one big play, and against the Dolphins, it's possible he could. As far as the wide receivers, Robert Woods, he's listed as questionable with a foot injury. Obviously, the Buffalo Bills do not have a good reputation about wide receivers and foot injuries, but Sexy Rexy is not concerned about Woods. He says he's good to go, so we'll see, but it's such a bad defense that even Marky Goodwin could be legit. So this week, and he's only owned in 3% of leagues. So if you're in a deep league, pick up Goodwin. And Dan Carpenter, I am not against you playing Mr. Carpenter this week. He has had 38 points in the last 4 weeks, and it's Miami. So yeah, okay.
I even moved him up in my rankings compared to our constituents. And I was like, he deserves to be higher than where he is.
He does. He deserves to be a lot higher, Ashley. I agree.
I didn't want to get crazy.
I don't know why. Week 7 to me is when we start getting crazy with our rankings. As far as the Dolphins, last week I told you not to play any Dolphin, right? I told you to bench them like they were on bye. Well, then Jay Ajayi decides to go out and get 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. Nobody could predict that. Okay? And you weren't going to start him. Don't blame it on me. You weren't going to start him. Listen, I still don't trust the man. Okay? I don't trust any of them, to be honest. Even Jarvis Landry now. I'm over it. The Bills' defense is good.
They are good.
The Dolphins are not. And more importantly, they can't be trusted. And their offensive line is bad. And I have to say, Landry is no more than a wide receiver 3 and Ajayi as a flex. That's that. And I'm not going to talk about anybody else because it's not worth it. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the San Francisco 49ers, 1-5. The Tampa Bays are 2-3. Sorry.
All right. We'll start with a little bit of news. Antoine Smith, who was with the Bears, signed with Tampa Bay on Monday.
Our favorite.
We love him. We love him a lot. Lewis
Wasn't
Murphy.
he averaging like 35 yards per carry for a while there in Arizona? Remember, he just kept,
Atlanta, you mean?
Oh yeah. And he would just like have this huge breakaway run and score a touchdown, but he'd only carry the ball twice. It was beautiful.
Yeah. But they did nothing with the Bears. And now he's with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And maybe we'll get a shot here because we've got some seriously injured players in the running core with Tampa Bay. But we've got some people coming back. So Lewis Murphy, who's a wide receiver whose knee was hurt, he began practicing on Monday. So he was on IR. So he has, by the rules of IR, a 21-day window to practice before he must be placed on the 53-man roster. So definitely make sure that we take a look there. And then Doug Martin, we got the hamstring. He was out of practice Monday and Wednesday. Apparently he suffered an injury setback a couple weeks ago. So there's no information that we have in terms of when he's actually going to be coming back. And as we know, Charles Sims was placed on IR. So that option is out. Vincent Jackson has really missed reports about what was going on with Vincent Jackson. At one point, he was alleged in IR. Now he is apparently necessarily not. He definitely has an ACL issue. Again, we're still waiting to get actual information that is solid on that. But they're trying to determine if he could come back or not. And if the injury is maybe not ACL, perhaps it's MCL. So in which case he might be able to avoid surgery. And that is a much quicker turnaround time where he could come back for the season. So either way, you probably weren't playing a whole lot of Vincent Jackson, but just something to keep in mind. Your must starts, as always, Mike Evans. he's constantly double digit targets. He's been this way for I don't know how long. And if you look at the matchup, Kelvin Benjamin was able to do fantastic. Doug Baldwin was able to do fantastic, along with other receivers that had slightly lower numbers, but still really great. It's a killer matchup. And the Niners give the 60 most points to wide receivers, and Mike Evans will do great. My sleepers, Jameis Winston, he's got an average matchup, which I'm realizing in my notes auto-corrected to Jameis Winston has an average woman. So that just made me chuckle. Autocorrect will get you every time. An average matchup, not woman. Niners give the 17th most fantasy points. So Winston coming off a bye, I think he will do well off the bye. I think that he is that kind of guy in that team. They kind of need that synergy of that extra bit of time to put some practice together. I think that he will do fine. I think there's better people out there to stream if you need to. And then Jack Quiz Rogers, he's the one that's stepping up in the place of Doug Martin being out and Charles Sims. And San Francisco does give up the third most points to running backs. So he could actually have a decent game.
Yes,
if you need to stream somebody. So and he isn't owned in a lot of leagues. So he is someone for you to go out and get. Jack Quiz Rogers. Again, he's not going to do great season long for you necessarily, but this is definitely a week that you could play him.
The Quiz.
My favorite fantasy name of all time, Jack Quizzed in my pants. It's great. All right, so
49ers.
So Carlos Hyde, he had a good game, but then he got hurt, and he's expected to miss, in his opinion, just one game. So it's allegedly not a long-term issue. They have a bye, so he's expecting to be back by week 9. So that's good. So it's bad for you this week, but who will be playing instead of him? Of course, they're going to throw a committee at you of Mike Davis and Sean Drawn. So you have no clue as to what that ratio is going to look like. I hope that you aren't in such a desperate situation that you need to look at either of these guys. If I had to guess, at least earlier in the week, they were leaning a little bit more Mike Davis than they were Sean. So if you got to pick one, that's the way I would go. Hopefully you're not in that situation. And then, as we said, we were on our show on Saturday and we're like, Jeremy Curley, he's been the guy. And I was like, that doesn't mean he's going to stay the guy. And allegedly, even all sources in San Francisco had said that he was going to remain the primary target. Oh, no. Torrey Smith, just like we said it would be, the emergence of Torrey Smith, 76 yards and a touchdown, infuriating. Vance McDonald, who has been a target all season long as well, certainly in the red zone. He did nothing, only 2 catches for 25 yards, and Jeremy Curley only had 2 catches for 12 yards. So irritating. Now, Curley does have a bit of an ankle injury. He was limited in practice on Thursday. So that's concerning. And as Brandon, I believe it was Brandon, or maybe it was Courtney, who said that Quentin Patton would actually get more involved.
Yeah, I said Patton.
And he was more involved than Jeremy Curley with 4 catches. Nothing to write home about. 4 catches, 52 yards, but he was more involved. Tampa does give up the 6th most points to fantasy wide receivers, 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers. So it could be a decent matchup, but then again, you are riding on Colin Kaepernick, who barely got more than 150 yards with 187. But he did get a touchdown. He was able to also rush for a respectable 66 yards. So I don't love him. I don't love anybody from this team this week, just because, again, the absolute inconsistency of this team.
All right, Baltimore Ravens 3-3. The New York Jets 1-5. The Ravens, you're starting the defense. The Jets can do nothing better than turn over the ball. This is yummy. Justin Tucker, obviously tied in second in fantasy points for kickers. Mike Wallace, the Jets give up the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receivers. This is amazing. He hasn't had a touchdown since week 2, but we'll get into Flacco later. But if Flacco's in, Wallace is in. I think he's going to get the end zone this week. Terrence West tore it up. 87 yards and 2 touchdowns. 4 catches, 36 yards. I mean, yummy. Must start. Sleeper is Dennis Pitta, and I don't want it anymore. I'm not doing it. I say he's on the bench. He had 10 targets last week and only had 36 yards. I'm over it. I know we think he's going. No, it's over. It's stupid. I'm done.
It's so sad.
And this is a great matchup. So it's like so tempting. I just can't continue this bad roller coaster. I'm off it. I want my money back. On the bench, Joe Flacco. Listen, he's listed as questionable. He didn't practice on Wednesday. It doesn't look good. I can't tell you to start an injured Joe Flacco who's only had 1 touchdown the last 2 weeks. So you're not going to start him anyways, but it does affect your wide receiver. So just keep an eye on it all. Steve Smith Sr., listen, he's no spring chicken. Obviously, this injury's weighing on him, and he's having a hard time doing things. So he's not practicing. It's not a good sign, so don't play him. And that's you, Ashley, the Jets.
I have to take a sip of water before I get into this diatribe.
Oh,
Don't have
jeez.
time for this.
We do, Brandon, because it's the Jets, baby. And I have been so confused by this drama all week that we're going to do a little bit of a play-by-play, but I'll make it quick, Brandon. So we're going to start a little backwards here onto who my bench is, which is obviously the quarterback situation. So speaking of benching, Ryan Fitzpatrick was benched early in the fourth quarter against the Cardinals. This shouldn't have been a huge surprise as he has been an interception machine as of late. It makes Hoyer throwing 1 interception be like, 1 interception, no big deal. Fitzy's thrown like 12, no biggie.
He's not going to throw an interception though, ever.
But Fitzpatrick, so he was 16 of 30 attempts for 174 yards and 1 interception. Now, he did get replaced by Geno Smith because the game was so out of hand at 28-3 that they're just like, whatever, let's throw Geno in, according to Todd Bowles. It wasn't necessarily just because Fitzy was playing poorly, is because they were down, so he wanted to just purely get Geno Smith some reps, is what he had said. Now, Todd Bowles then indicated in the press conference on Tuesday that he had revisited his previous comments throughout the week that Fitzpatrick was their starter. And so then he said that he needed to revisit that in terms of him being a starter. And he said that he did not say he was making a change, but he didn't want to make it abundantly clear that Ryan Fitzpatrick was indeed his starter. And then, of course, today, 1 day later, Geno Smith has now been named the starter for Wednesday. Fitzy then they did want to make sure they pointed out, because again, there's completely all over the page here, that Fitzpatrick could regain his starting job at some point, according to Todd Bowles. I mean, Geno didn't exactly go in there and kill it. I mean, he only threw for 31 yards off 6 different passes, and he had an interception in a matter of that time as well. So I think we are about to embark on what's going to be a very up and down quarterback situation, which makes me nervous for the players around them. But with that said, Brandon Marshall is such a beastly, strong, big wide receiver. I don't think he's going to be hugely impacted with whoever is in. I think you can still continue to play him. Quincy, not as much. I think that one you're going to want to definitely put on your bench and see how this quarterback situation is going to play out. I am telling you to bench Matt Forte.
Oh, yeah.
He only had 19 yards. He is injured. He played, a decent, 21 snaps, not great, not awful. But he's got a knee issue and he is limited. This is also really bad matchup, as the Ravens are really stout against the run. They give up the second fewest points. So this is not a week to sit there and just try to put him in. Get them out of your lineups, and you're going to want to get the tight ends out of the lineups as well.
Bam. San Diego Chargers 2-4 at the Atlanta Falcons 4-2.
We kind of already discussed last week about how great the Chargers did because we recorded a little bit late, but I'll reiterate quickly on this one. Hunter Henry was great. He had 83 yards off 8 targets and a touchdown. I discussed the fact that they love his sure hands. I don't see his production going down. Even when Gates does get healthy, Hunter Henry is going to have a role in this offense. If anything, he is Phillip Rivers' favorite target right now because of just how steady his hands are. So you could definitely need to keep Hunter Henry in your lineup. Melvin Gordon also had a good game. You're not going to be benching Melvin Gordon. Phillip Rivers, he had his absolute lowest yardage of the season against the Broncos. But what did you expect? We told you that was how it was going to be. There's no reason to freak out about that. This, I think, will be a bit of a bounce back week. The only problem is that this is a really bad matchup for his wide receivers. Speaking of which, Travis Benjamin is not practicing at the moment. He is wearing technically a compression sleeve on his leg. I don't love that. And with somebody who's already been struggling and now we've got an injury on top of it, but that does mean good things for Hunter Henry. So again, get him in your lineup. Antonio Gates is also not 100%. We've got a hamstring issue, which he has never dealt with before. And he has gone on record to basically say he's just learning about it. He's never experienced an injury like this. And it is very different in terms of injuries that he has had.
Isn't that what he said about his knee last year? I think it's just old age at this point, right?
It could be old age, but I mean,
I say that to myself all the time.
All the time.
You're not going to be playing him again. So really, Hunter Henry's your man. Hunter Henry and Gordon.
Falcons.
All right. So start everyone. This is start of my great analysis again.
Yay.
Although one worked out, the Patriots. One did not work out, the Steelers.
Yeah. But Ben got hurt, which never helps.
Wow. What a
stunk before then,
horrible
though.
situation. Yeah, it was all bad. Okay. You have to start Tevin Coleman. Why? Because San Diego Chargers give up over 69 receiving yards and 9 catches per game to running backs. That is second only to the Atlanta Falcons. And since he can't play himself, this is his number one matchup of the week. So,
Yay.
or of the year, I should say. So make sure to plug him in. Freeman was blah last week, but he's still the volume play. So he's definitely still a starter. You went up against Seattle. At Seattle.
It is what it is.
Sometimes people's complaints drive me crazy.
Chalk up, move the next week.
Exactly. Sanu is always risky with a touchdown in week 1 and week 6. Weird, but that's who he is. And it seems like Jacob Tammy, that party is over. The keg is dry. It's done. 2 or fewer catches.
Everyone's passed out on the couch.
Absolutely. And people are like, oh my gosh, I can't find my keys. You know what party you're at. You're at the Jacob Tammy party. Anyway, 2 or fewer
He's
catches.
back to babysitting.
He's back to babysitting for 16 or less yards over the last 3 games. So it is what it is.
New England Patriots 5-1. The Pittsburgh Steelers 4-2.
This is going to be so easy. I'm going to blow your brain. Landry Jones is starting for the Pittsburgh Steelers because Ben Roethlisberger had a knee scope surgery. What have you. There are completely conflicting reports as to what exactly this means, okay? And what it does mean is you can't start anyone.
Yeah.
This also means you're nervous about Antonio Brown. And I just want to remind you about the really bizarre, let's just say, decline that happened with Antonio Brown last year when Landry Jones and Michael Vick filled in for those 4 games. And I understand Michael Vick's not there right now. But Landry Jones is.
Mm-hmm. And he was a problem. So.
Maybe worse.
Mm-hmm.
So I will say that Le'Veon Bell, though, is going to still get a ton of carries. Actually, the amount of carries went up and yards when Big Ben wasn't there, which makes sense because they're not passing as much. So good news, Le'Veon Bell owners. However, Antonio Brown went from 13.25 targets, 9.92 catches, 133.83 yards, and 0.83 touchdowns per game last season with Ben Roethlisberger to just under 8 targets, just over 4 catches for 58 yards, and he scored 0 touchdowns in 4 games.
Woo!
But you want to know what's worse than that? The other wide receivers. All of the other wide receivers combined last year, they averaged, I'm not joking, 5.5 targets, 3 catches, 45 yards per game. Split among Sammy Coates, Marcus Sweeten, and Eli Rogers. Tight ends, 2.25 targets for 1.25 catches for 13 yards and 0 touchdowns in those 4 games.
If I had an option, I'd be benching Antonio Brown. I sadly do not have an option.
He's the only one. He and Le'Veon Bell.
But even then, I mean, you say he's still not going to do well.
No, he's not, but you can't bench him.
But you can't bench him.
You can bench him, but
if you have really good wide
nobody
receivers,
else
you can
I can
bench him.
bench.
I mean, the worst part of this is that Landry Jones actually looked worse in preseason this year than he did last year, filling in for Big Ben for those 4 games.
It's dark times.
Dark times. On the other side, though, that means you could play all the Patriots. And by all the Patriots, I mean, their wide receivers are hit or miss. You want to play Rob Gronkowski. Martellus Bennett's a freak, so either he's going to be big in the game or he's not. And, Le'Veon Bell and James White, everybody.
Yeah,
James White. I picked him up a lot of places. What?
You said you meant LeGarrette Blount?
LeGarrette Blount, sorry. Yes. And then James White. I like both of those guys. And in fact, James White's really cheap on daily too, in case you're looking at that. But the Steelers have allowed an average of 294 passing yards per game, 64 of which have come from the running back position on the season. And they're going to be in good field position. I like it. I think this will be a nice blunt game too. But if I have James White, I'm rolling him out. Pittsburgh. It's dire.
Seattle Seahawks 4-1 at the Arizona Cardinals 3-3.
So tight end Luke Wilson, who none of you are playing, suffered a knee injury. 2 L's, the double Olsen. He had to go on MRI. It's again knee injury. He did have to have arthroscopic surgery. No timetable on when he's going to come back, but we wish you a speedy recovery. And I don't know if it's going to have any impact on this team. I think he was more so used as a blocker for Russell Wilson and his potential injury, not injury. I don't know what's going on with Russell Wilson's situation, but I just want to mention it. Thomas Rawls, he is still at least a couple weeks away from being cleared. So again, we're still holding off on him, obviously. Russell Wilson. So he had an okay game. He was 25 for 37 for 270 yards, no touchdowns, which is very much not like him. And he was practicing in full, but Arizona gives up the fourth fewest points to quarterbacks. Russell Wilson has not exactly been Russell Wilson of old. I don't love this matchup for him at all. But it's a tough matchup all across the board because Christian Michael, who did have 2 touchdowns last week and 64 yards on top of that, again, tough matchup for him as the Cardinals give up the 4th fewest points to running back. So there's really nobody on this team who has a good matchup. And then if we look at Graham,
I'm just thinking in my head, Brandon and I had this debate at the beginning of the season about who was going to be the number 1 quarterback, Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson. And now, maybe going into week 9, week 10, we're going to be talking about, is it Brian Hoyer or Case Keenum? And that's 2016.
Oh, late round quarterback never got so popular, right?
Yeah, seriously.
Sorry. Everyone's like, whoop, whoop. Give me my Kirk Cousins and Matt Stafford stack of life. Dak Prescott is here.
So
Yep. Well, we'll go back to the Seahawks with because I was already on a dark train of thought there.
Let's
but
do it.
It gets a little more positive with Graham. So, he was getting targeted 9 times, which I'm loving to see that number of targets. He caught 6 of them. He was the leading receiver technically on the team with 89 yards over the Falcons. Sadly, all the other receivers were under 40 yards. So not great. That was including Doug Baldwin, who we were expecting to have a bigger game. That was a huge letdown. But, the tight end situation, I feel like we've just kind of I think it's partially because Russell Wilson is injured, not injured. We don't know what's going on. He's actually now looking at Jimmy Graham because I don't think his first option necessarily is to run like it's been in the past because of his injury. So he is looking for Jimmy Graham. And this has been something positive for him. We've seen a little bit more of that shift there. Over the last 3 different games that we've had, he's had over 302 yards. And a touchdown as well in there. So what I don't love is, again, Cardinals, tough defense, super, super tough. They give, against the tight ends. But then again, the matchup is really bad against the wideouts. So I think that might actually work in his favor because it is a tough matchup against the wideouts, a tough matchup against the run. And Wilson is not exactly run first at the moment right now. Graham might be the beneficiary of that.
Awesome.
Well, listen, Arizona Cardinals, this is easy peasy. David Johnson, yes.
Yes.
Forever. You guys, I mean, I don't know how many of you guys keep having this issue, but I am having David Johnson issues where either he's on my team and I'm just winning, or I'm playing against him and I want to stab somebody.
Yep.
Mostly myself.
As
And,
I said a
like,
couple weeks ago, 20 points is okay. Thank you. I appreciate the 20 points, and I can handle him scoring 20 points against me. 30,
30, different story.
40, depending
it's
on the
enough.
format. Yeah.
It's enough. It's enough.
Oh,
Thank you.
and it's over and over. It just, you can't,
Yes,
there's no
every
letting
week,
up.
every
It's
week.
just over and over every week. Unbelievable. Okay. So I will say that Seattle gives up the third fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterback, the fifth fewest to opposing wide receivers, and they're not doing anything anyway.
Yep.
Bad. You guys, Carson Palmer hasn't had a decent game since week 2. And last week we were all excited because he was playing the New York Jets. It was like, here it is. Remember John Brown? Everyone's like, I love John Brown this week. I love John Brown.
I need to point out that I was very adamantly not excited about Carson Palmer.
It's true. You and Courtney have been fighting often this year.
We
It's true.
have been about him.
Yeah. Well, you know what? He did catch 5 of his passes for 54 yards, no touchdown, but it was a little bit tragic. So, yeah, I mean, I have a hard time trusting anyone in this particular matchup other than David Johnson. Don't you dare even. If you tweet me about David Johnson, I will lose it.
Lose it.
You're starting him.
All right. The comeback queens, the Houston Texans 4-2, the Denver Broncos 4-2.
Woo! Lamar Miller.
Finally.
This whole team
Man.
annoys me. I hate this whole team. There's not a single player on this team I like anymore.
Oh,
And I'm a
come
DeAndre Hopkins owner, and
on.
I'm so over him. Over
You
this
get me
whole
sad.
darn team.
You were a little happy to have Lamar Miller finally score a touchdown.
I hate Lamar Miller.
Well, then it was not an enjoyable game for Courtney, but for the rest of us, 149 yards. Yeah, I'll take that. And a touchdown. And then he also had 29 yards in the air and another score off a pass. So, he had yet to get a scoring touchdown rushing touchdown as a Texan. So he was able to kind of break through that wall. Congrats to you, Lamar Miller. I hope there are many, many more. And it's actually a decent matchup against the Broncos. The Broncos give up the 12th most fantasy points. So Lamar Miller could have another good game. The rest of this team will not have a good game. But Lamar Miller should have a good game. And we did say that they have to go back to the run because when they tried to not do it, it was disastrous. So I'm glad that they did go back to the run there with Lamar Miller. Now, DeAndre Hopkins, he was at least targeted more. He caught 9 catches. So I think him and Brock had a little chit chat and they worked that one out. Hopkins had 71 yards. But the issue was that Denver gives up the fewest points to wide receivers. I really hate this matchup for DeAndre Hopkins. Not so much for Hopkins, but for Brock, because Brock is not good about throwing into tight coverage, and they are going to be all over Hopkins. It could be a nightmare. So I don't want you were excited because Hopkins did well last week. I don't want you to get too excited because this is not the week where he's going to blow up. Will Fuller, who was active but didn't actually play at all last week, he is practicing. He says he's looking forward to playing this week, so we should expect him to play. But again, really tough secondary with the Broncos. So I'm not sure I'm going that way either. CJ Fedorowicz, he's somebody that's getting targeted 85 yards and a touchdown. So he's somebody that has been in the mix. I've been a little bit nervous in terms of with Ryan Griffin, who's taking a little bit of his touches away, but ultimately Fedorowicz is the one coming out on top. Hopefully you're not needing to dig this deep into the tight end position, but if you do, there is some upside there. And the Broncos do give up the 17th most fantasy points, so it is a favorable matchup. Osweiler, man,
Not
came
starting.
back. It was what?
Not starting.
Not starting? Is he hurt?
No,
No,
don't
she's
start
saying
him
don't
in
start
fantasy.
him.
Oh, I was like,
Anyway, don't listen to me. No, go ahead.
I was
Go ahead.
like-
Sorry. I was just trying to do
I
it
knew
quick.
it was funny in the air.
Wrong.
Yeah, you are not wrong. You're a nasty woman, Brandon.
Wrong.
Brock Osweiler, he was doing horrible. And then it just kind of clicked. And you know what? I think he's got Lamar Miller to thank for that, because then he was finally opening it up a little bit because Lamar Miller was just going off with his game. But with very few men at the time, I got to give him credit. He came back. They tied it up with a couple huge plays. He had a 75-yard drive and a 53-yard drive. They got it done and they won in overtime. So I will give you props to that. Absolutely. But he's now going against Denver, which I do think is going to mess with his head. And the Denver team gives up the seventh quarterbacks. So do not start Brock Osweiler this week.
Thank you. Denver Broncos. Listen, last week was really bad. I get it. I'm a Demaryius Thomas owner myself.
Drops.
The week will be, this week will be tough as well. Houston gives up the third fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. It's not going to be pretty. And that I put Emmanuel Sanders down in my sleepers. I have him ranked a lot lower than most people. I just can't get behind it. Not this week. He didn't practice on Tuesday. They say there shouldn't be no concerns about his injury, but it doesn't really matter. This is a tough defense, and they just haven't been able to do anything. So I hate it. I'm playing Denver's defense. I'm playing Brandon McManus. He's had 340-something field goals in the last 2 weeks. And we all know that Denver has trouble scoring touchdowns. So McManus is probably going to be the guy against Houston. As far as CJ Anderson, I don't know what to say to Anderson owners. He has been less than okay the last 4 games. Kubiak now praises Devontae Booker and says he's going to have more involvement on Monday night. So it stinks. And Houston gives up some yards to running backs, but I don't think I can trust him this week for a win. So I think you need to find somebody else to go over Anderson this week. It's a hot mess. It's an absolute hot mess.
It just sucks that his touchdown got called back, and so did a couple other big plays.
I know.
Penalties, man, it'll kill you.
That's right. And everybody, and that's the thing, it's not just CJ Anderson, obviously. Everybody on the offensive line got a holding call last week against San Diego. Every single
control
guy. Yeah, it's really bad. And what are you supposed to do with that? What is anybody supposed to do with that? And I feel bad for these wide receivers that are running full speed down the field and catching a ball for 40 yards and it getting called back. It's constant. It's with all of them. And the game was so gross, sloppy. It's just not okay. And I don't know if it's going to get better. And that's where we are in the situation with the Broncos. So we were worried about the quarterbacks. It's really the offensive line that's a major concern. So it's not good. And as far as Trevor, he's on the bench, and so is Virgil Green. Sorry, what a disappointment. Worse than Zach Ertz. And that's it for us. Week 7. Again, get them out of your lineup. Carolina Panthers and the Dallas Cowboys. They're on bye. Adios. Chicago Bears and the Green Bay Packers play Thursday night, so make sure you set your lineup. As for us, you can get more of us on Saturday nights from 9 to 11 Eastern on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio. So chat with us on Twitter at HerFantasyFB. We're around to answer your questions. Make sure to hop over to herfantasyfootball.com. You can get our rankings, sign up for our mailing list so you can be part of our fun FanDuel game, Diced, where we give you 4 ingredients to set up a free lineup. So very, very fun. Great prices there. And until next week, you guys, no more faking it.